Hello everyone, welcome to your Yin Yoga class for the hips. In this Yin class, we're going to focus on the areas that usually feel tension or compression or even overuse, and that's the lower back, the hips, especially the front of the hip. Depending also on your lifestyle, we tend to sit around the whole day. We tend to just be in one shape, where our hips are always flexed, or maybe standing around a lot, and the lower back definitely kind of feels it. And so these are all just kind of related cousins and areas here. So we are going to do these poses to pay attention to these spots. As you can see, I have all the props that I have. So I encourage you guys to grab everything that you have. We'll have different shapes of pillows, yoga blocks, or blankets. So if you need a minute to grab those, please do so. We are actually going to start here in a supported child's pose. And when I say supported child's pose, I want you to get your hips towards your heels. Place something underneath the bums, or as I would call my favorite, I call this the hamstring pillow. I place a blanket between my hamstrings and my calves, and I separate my knees apart. And then I grab my bolster in front of me. That could be your pillow, that could be a thick blanket. And I just want to keep my yoga blocks close to me, just in case my lower back isn't quite open yet and I have a little far to reach. So I want you guys to start crawling towards your bolster. And then just exhale, place your forehead down on the bolster. And start to press your hips towards the heels without really necessarily overdoing that motion. What's important here is that you should not be in a hurry with the breath. You should not be in a hurry to feel settled. You actually make that a gradual experience. So let's take a deep inhale through the nose. Open the mouth and slowly sigh it out. A few more times just like that. Inhale through nose. Drop into your bolster. Beautiful. One more time. Inhale. And then exhale. Notice the shift in the energy in your elbows, your shoulders, the back of the neck. Just soften the breath. With Yin Yoga, we don't really want to be forceful with the breath because it really does go against the energy that we're trying to establish. And start to turn your head, maybe your left cheek towards the bolster, freeing up your fingers, getting any of the wiggles out of the way. Noticing if the monotony and the stillness is what's triggering your mind to wander. And perhaps your expectations here is to empty the mind when there's no such thing. You really cannot empty the mind in a way that we talk about as far as meditation and all these yogic principles that we read and follow. It's really more about acknowledging that there is stuff in the mind. There's stuff that we're thinking about, and you treat them like clouds, and you just let them pass by. You let these thoughts, you let these ideas, you let these things that are in your mind just kind of drift by. Acknowledge them, and then let them go. Slowly switch. Maybe the right side of your neck now is on the bolster. And so going back to what we were just talking about, treating these ideas and these
things that we think about as clouds, that definitely benefits practices like these slow practices like yin yoga. Because you're in a certain experience, you're in a certain pose for a long time. And you don't want the mind to fight what the body needs. You don't want the mind to go haywire while the body is begging to just feel settled and gentle. So align both properties, align both energies. And even in this first pose, tell yourselves, whatever it is, it'll still be there after this class. So I'll just honor my time here. Spend one more breath here. One inhale and one exhale. And then gradually release from the pose. Peel your forehead away from the prop. Slide the bolster to the side. Lift your hips. And then remove the blanket out of the way. Just have a block in front of you. We're going to get into a Sphinx pose. And Sphinx is not known to be a hip pose necessarily, but I would like to include Sphinx in any lower back and hips class because we are so flexed like we were, say, in child's pose. And Sphinx is the exact opposite. It extends the hip. Well, we want to recruit the muscles in the glutes to be able to do that. It's also a training in our minds where we want to educate ourselves. Every time we want to extend the hip, we really want to recruit the gluteal muscles because that's their job. They're hip extensors. So right here, just be on the tops of your feet. You can cross the arms so the left hand is reaching out towards the right elbow, right towards the left. And my favorite variation of Sphinx is my forehead down on the block. That way I can lengthen the back of my neck and I can just feel soft here. And you're not holding the gluteal muscles like that. You're not sucking it in and all the way just engaging them 100%. There's definitely an engagement and then a release that happens. And if somebody were to look at you, it looks like nothing is happening. But you know, as you activate those glutes, the hips do feel more open towards the mat. So just do that a couple more times. The important thing is you're not dumping in your lower back. So this is definitely an educational and informative pose. As far as the shoulders are concerned, the shoulder points are going to naturally elevate towards the ears. And that's fine. You kind of allow it to happen here as long as you're not overdoing it, that there's too much shrugging happening and that you feel this too much in the trapezius muscles, which are the muscles kind of in that corner where the shoulder and the neck meet. Let's take a couple more breaths here. And then gently slide the hands underneath your shoulders. Peel your forehead away from the yoga block. Come into hips on heels for a moment here. The change of energy is always there when we change altitudes. In this case, we came from a prone position to an upright seated position. Now we're going to get into butterfly, which is like a hip opening, one of the more popular hip opening poses. Butterfly, I always either have something underneath my bums, or in this case, I'm going to change it up a little bit and fold my blanket like so. So I do have this blanket kind of over my shins, a little bit of elevation with the bolster in front of me. And then these blocks, I always have a choice to place them under my knees or right here in front of me. So I'm just going to place them on the side. Remove the bum flesh out of the way. Remove your buttock flesh out of the way so you're sitting on your sitting bones. Have a little bit of shoulder rolls. Just feels good. And then start to glaze your upper body towards your prop. My favorite parts about this pose is that you can start here with your elbows down. Just kind of letting the head hang. It's definitely a very introspective pose, especially if you're looking down. Kind of gives you an opportunity to sort of space out without really necessarily tuning out. In my internal dialogue, I call this my pensive stop. What that means in some of these poses in my practice, especially this one, the butterfly, it tends to trigger a pensive part of me. It kind of makes me think, probably because of the stillness. And once I'm over that sort of pensive state, I just grab my yoga block. And then I just let my head hang. Maybe that happened to you. Maybe that happens for you. Maybe it doesn't. Just honor what your body's telling you today. In this fold, we're opening the lower back. And if that doesn't feel good to you, just have an upright butterfly. Letting the fingers go. There's no hard work to be done. If there is hard work in your mind, the hard work isn't just to focus on the breath and to honor the space that you created here. Full inhales and exhales without over efforts. Take a few more breaths. And slowly slide your hands towards your hips. Peel your forehead away from the prop. Again, the shift of energy as we change altitudes. This time we're going to do another hip opening pose. And we're going to open the legs out wide. And we'll notice the difference where both might be hip openers, but this one's definitely a little bit different because we are going to spread the legs. And so you can set the bolster aside for now. For this pose, I usually like it when I put the blanket underneath my bum. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So try it out for yourself. Or if you want to skip that part, that's fine too. I spread my legs apart. And usually when you feel like your legs are tight, I want to place a block underneath my knees. That way I'm still getting plenty of lengthening in the hamstrings or feedback from the hamstrings without taxing my legs. So this pose does not necessarily open the hamstrings. So sometimes they require open hamstrings. And today my hamstrings are not quite there yet, so I'm just going to place these blocks underneath. And instead of placing the bolster in front of me and putting me in the same fold, I can always just suspend this bolster and place it underneath my forehead. So see if that's accessible to you. You can just let your hands hang on the shins and the side, relaxing the ankles, relaxing the toes. If you want a deeper fold or a more upright pose, please honor that. Whatever your body is feeling definitely trumps whatever I'm cueing for today. Notice the ebbs and flows of the energy and breath. And just like the thoughts, you let them drift by. And anytime you feel like you're holding tension in the jaw, between the eyebrows, even behind the ears, just remind yourselves, come back to the breath. Come back to this gentler space. The biggest sensation that is the most critical in this practice is the sensation of surrender, the sensation of giving in. Let's give this dragonfly pose one more breath. And then grab a hold of your prop. Slide it away from you. Grab the blocks or whatever underneath your legs. We're going to get into a dragon pose. Then we're going to twist this dragon before we get into an upward swan. So I always have a blanket in front of me and also a block. So maybe you can have that for you. We're going to start with our right leg forward in this dragon pose. And so set your right foot forward and then send your left knee back. And if the floor is too far for you, this is definitely when yoga blocks can come in handy. And so in this dragonfly pose, I'm going to direct my knees over my toes. I'm just going to hang out here for a while. And I hope you guys do feel also almost like this sense of not necessarily being frozen in a pose, but the breath and the energy is definitely what makes the pose dynamic. Even though we look like we're frozen and we're still and nothing's happening, we both know plenty of stuff is happening. Feel the lengthening and the opening happening in front of the left hip. And again, when we're talking about opening the hips, extending the hips, the glute muscles in the back have to be recruited. Not necessarily all the time and you're holding it in. This is a dragon pose. And as we honor this dragon pose, just letting the breath feel soft and light. Let the magic happen in front of that hip. Set the block on the right side aside. Turn your toes towards the right, just 45 degrees. Sink into the left hip without dumping into that hip joint. So feel this integration by really recruiting that left glute. Turn the body towards the right side. And using this right hand, you can kind of push the chest away from the thigh, but not too much. You can drop your left ear towards your left shoulder as long as that left shoulder has space. Beautiful. These lengthened periods of time is definitely a test of discipline. And the yin yoga practice is hardest to do in the middle of a hectic day or a busy week, but that's when we need it the most. One full breath here. And then slowly come back to your dragon. You can just kind of heel toe your right foot towards the left side of your mat, coming into an upward swan, or as a lot of people more popularly call this the pigeon pose. I always like to have a blanket underneath my right bum or my bent bum. And so grab those blocks, and place them in front of you. And opening up that left hip that we talked about, the glutes are always recruited. And you kind of feel this energy between the thighs where you're trying to adduct or bring the hips kind of together or bring the thighs together. But that definitely feels good for the hips so that there is no dumping. There's still some integration happening towards the midline of the body. And to me, that is a healthy thing. We really don't want to just orient our body into one direction all the time, one energy all the time. We want to switch things up a little bit. And even here, as we're opening up that right hip, we have to think, well, what's happening to the left hip in the back? How do we cater to that? And so we make these little changes, these little tweaks. And if some of you want to go ahead and do the sleeping swan, which is when your head is down and your hands are down, please do so. For me today, my energy just wants to stay in this upward swan. You notice my fingers still free, still feel free, and I'm not grabbing the sides of the block. I'm just staying right here. Spend one last breath here. And then slowly place your hands down on the mat. Release this pose. Get into all fours or hands and knees or quadruped. And find some nice hip rotations on that right side. Maybe some hip rotations also on the left side. And just like that, we're going to get into dragon pose on the left side, which I'm going to face this side so I can face you. So your left leg is in front. Your right knee is behind you. Blankets and yoga blocks are there on the ready. Driving my knee over my toes. Over my ankles rather, and already feeling some opening happening in the right hip. And since we just opened up that side, it definitely feels sticky and heavy right now. It feels stuffed because we just flexed it. We just flexed that hip. So we try to give some equal treatment on each side of the body, which of course is impossible. We can never achieve 50-50 attention, right? So we just do the best we can. Last breath here. Get the block on the left side, set it aside. Turn your toes out. You can leave your right hand on the block. Send your left hand inside your left thigh and use it to push your chest away from that leg. Again, without necessarily sinking too much. Finding some balance, finding some integration between the thighs. Right hip is opening, and the left hip is externally rotated. This external rotation and extension pairing of both hips is one of my favorites because I actually have a job where I get to sit around almost all day, and if I wasn't a yoga instructor, I wouldn't know what to do. And so it's good to have these nuggets of wisdom and awareness in our bodies. And it kind of makes me self-correct and self-adjust. And I hope you guys too.
Let's get into our upward swan position. So heel toe, the left foot towards the right. Grab a hold of your cushion, your blanket, your prop, your pillow, whatever it is, to place underneath the left bum. Let's see right here. If you're not as clumsy as I am in folding these blankets, there you go. Place it underneath the bums. Hands on the blocks again, just to feel a little bit more supported. I'm spreading my fingers, finding this like lean forward. And again, sending some energy between the thighs, so it's almost like you're scissoring your thighs together. And the right glute is activated. And I know a lot of traditionalists for the yin yoga practice, a lot of schools of thought argue about the activation of the muscles in a yin practice. We're supposed to just surrender and let everything go. But I kind of want a hybrid approach because this is the benefit that I've felt in my body. And I hope you guys take that and apply whatever it is that your body needs today. Go ahead and do your sleeping swan, or you can stay upright in this upward swan like I am. Took a few more breaths here. Beautiful. Slowly release from this pose. Release your hands from the block. And in any way that feels comfortable to you, come into your quadruped once again. You can do some cat-cows. You can do some hip rotations. Whatever feels good. I'm going to start doing cat-cows right here. Inhaling, dropping the belly, lifting my tailbone and lifting my gaze. And as you exhale, slowly round the spine. Eventually dropping your head. Inhaling up. Exhaling down, just giving our bodies a break from those long holds. One more time, perhaps. Inhale. And then exhale. And then gently cross at the ankles or cross at the knees. Let's make our way on our backs. I'm going to use this blanket as a pillow underneath my head to keep that relaxing energy, that yin energy, the cold energy. We're going to get into a stirred up pose here, or otherwise known as happy baby. But before we get there, I always like to just start squeezing my knees towards my chest or my armpits, kind of just seeing how my hips feel like. Starting to do some knee rolls or knee circles right here. Always a good way to massage the lower back. And I know these are not yin poses necessarily, but it's just always good to check in with the body. And sometimes if movement is the one that gives you space while still having a yin practice, then why not do it? Why not combine both? All right, stirred up pose. Encourage your knees to come towards your armpits. Hands can be outside the legs. And notice if your hips or your lower back wants to lift up. So flatten your lower back first. And if that means that the feet are too high for you to grab, just place your hands or interlace your hands even with your arms behind the knees. Or grab a hold of the ankle. Flattening that lower back. Or grabbing the sides of the feet eventually. Grabbing inside the feet is fine. Just make sure that you're not just dumping on that hip joint. Relax the shoulder blades down. Flatten the lower back down. You're doing the best you can.
The breath is soft. Last few breaths right here. Maybe let's do a cleansing breath here. Inhale through nose. Open the mouth, sigh it out. Beautiful. Let's get into a reclined shoelace. So just get your right knee on top of your left. Winging your feet out. Lift them up off the mat. And just right here, grab the shins. We're just going to make sort of this lightweight version of this pose. Grab the shins. And as you're flattening your lower back, you're directing your knees away from you and your feet towards you. Again, there's this integration, this energy. It's not sloppy. Something is still working. We're still firing up towards that midline. We're still wiring things towards that midline. And then gently switch the legs. This time the left knee is on top of the right. Wing the legs out, wing the feet out. Once you grab the shins or the ankles, work lower back down. Knees away from you and the feet are towards you. I hope everybody's breaths are soft. Let's just spend a couple more breaths right here. Full inhales and exhales. And on an exhale, slowly release from the pose. You can lengthen the legs out. Lengthen the arms on either side of the hips. You can take a couple of twists if you want. Otherwise, do some knee bounces. Placing something underneath the knees for a final resting pose. You can hands on the belly or on either side of the hip. Soften the breath. Shavasana or whatever final resting pose you have. And gently, gradually send some energy into your fingers and toes and start moving those parts. Moving your ankles and arms, perhaps. And start to give yourselves a good morning stretch. Point the toes ahead of you. Arms reach out overhead. Long and strong on that inhale. And on the exhale, bend the legs and roll onto a side of your choice. Pausing there for a moment, your chest feels heavy and your eyelids feel heavy too. You're resisting any urges to do a sit-up. Just gently press yourselves up. We're going to close this class with our hands pressed to prayer at the heart, thumbs touching our chest. Closing this practice with us bowing down to our hands. You can repeat after me or you can just listen. But this is my body, this is my breath, this is my being, and this is my business, and I will take care of it.
Thank you so much, guys, for spending 35 minutes with me in your yin yoga practice for the hips. I hope your hips feel blissful and happy. I hope you guys check out the rest of my classes. I hope to see you there. Otherwise, have a good rest of your week. Namaste from me to you. Bye for now. Thanks.